topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Houston. I'm still trying to get used to doing 8 different cities, and some of them are in the mornings, some of them are in the afternoons. But we have got the most incredible show for you today. And with the way times are when it comes to finances, this is really an important show. Today's show is brought to you by Autumn Oak Speech and Hearing, Houston's own Autumn Oak Speech and Hearing. If you are suffering from hearing loss, give Autumn Oaks a call. Well, I got to tell you, the show today is special because a company, or I must say a law firm that we have been working with, Texas Debt Defense, is one of the finest alternatives to bankruptcy. Yes, alternative to bankruptcy. This is better than bankruptcy. So you're going to get a unbelievable education today. And just because you're in Houston, we get a lot of people listening from Dallas, from Austin, from other cities around Texas. They can handle cases statewide. So let's get started. Let me introduce you to attorney Finis Cowan of Texas Debt Defense. Good afternoon, Finis. Okay, what's happening? Did we lost Finis? Okay, well, let me wait for Finis to get back on the air. Something made him drop. Yes, today we're going to be talking about alternatives to bankruptcy. And who would have ever thought that you could have some major money problems and not have to file for bankruptcy? I'm trying to fill in why he hopefully comes back on with us. You know what, Juan? Maybe if you can run a commercial, and let me see if I can walk them through this. Can we do that? Let's see if Juan is, if we can do this.
Okay. I'm back.
Oh, there he is. Okay. What do you think happened?
Oh, just the mysteries of technology we all deal with.
So, Finis, I was just telling everybody what you do is a great alternative to bankruptcy. That now, when you thought, hey, I can't take this anymore, I've exhausted everything, I've got to file bankruptcy. Well, you have a way that they won't have to file bankruptcy, hopefully. And so tell everybody about your practice, first of all.
I sure will. My name is Finis Cowan. I've been a lawyer here in Texas since 1985. My firm is called Texas Debt Defense.
I love the name.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you.
And we're also running it down at the bottom of the screen too.
Our goal, our specialty is helping people with their debt problems, whether it's credit card debt, medical debt, IRS debt, any kind of tax debt. We're equipped to handle that. We have a number of tools that we use that gives us an advantage over a lot of the services out there that advertise so much on TV, like debt consolidation companies and
Yes.
bankruptcy firms that we think usually result in a much better outcome. We have the tools and the expertise and the reputation to help negotiate credit card debts more favorably than most people can on their own. We see that over and over again. The credit card companies will offer a consumer to settle for 80%. They come and hire us, and we almost always can get a much more favorable settlement. And if we need to go to trial, which we do on a regular basis, we can often find defenses and defects in the creditor's case that wins and eliminates all the debt. There's a lot of upsides and downsides to bankruptcy. I'll discuss that in more detail, but I hope that answers your question about what we do.
Well, I got to tell you, I've heard conversations before where a person will say, you know what, I'm going to file for bankruptcy. And, the other person will go, well, how much do you owe? And they'll go, well, I owe $15,000. And they'll go, that's a small amount. You shouldn't file bankruptcy for that. Well, now you have an alternative to bankruptcy.
We do. And we usually do handle much smaller debts for the majority of our clients than would justify a bankruptcy. Another word about bankruptcy. I don't know, most of our listeners are old enough to remember, but in 2005, our duly elected president and former Delaware senator spearheaded a major reform in the U.S. bankruptcy code, which had the primary effect of screwing consumer debtors who can't pay their debts. Remember, most of those banks are headquartered in Delaware, where they have very favorable laws.
Yes.
And that was connection with Biden. And maybe it needed to be done, whatever. But Congress, in its infinite wisdom, changed the bankruptcy law 17 years ago that made it much, much less useful for most consumer debts that have income and have accumulated some assets. Chapter 7 is pretty much limited to folks who have nothing and no ability to pay their debts. And if you have sufficient income and assets, your Chapter 7 filing will get involuntarily converted to the dreaded Chapter 13. It's named 13 for a reason. It's bad luck. It means you've got to repay all the debt. They give you more time to do it, but there's rarely any dischargeable. If you have a home, Chapter 13 may be your only recourse. But for most folks who come to us, they are considering bankruptcy, and we want to analyze that and give them their options. But usually, for most of our folks who cannot pay all their credit card debt or other debts, a negotiated settlement is far better than the bankruptcy and all the stigma and blowback and side effects that linger for so long after a bankruptcy. It has its place, particularly in small businesses now. It can be a very useful tool. But for most consumers, it's not the best tool. That's our experience.
We just got our first text from a
Sure,
listener.
I welcome questions.
Yes, listen
I've got
to
my
this.
staff here. If I've forgotten the answer to anything, they may have the knowledge to help.
Finis, I doubt that. But he's got a good question. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, is there a fee to sit down with you for you to tell me what my choices are?
We offer free consultations over the telephone, and we get their information. We've been doing this over 30 years, and we can tell them within a 15-20 minute conversation that this is a low pressure exchange of information. There's no high pressure sales tactics or anything, but we can tell within 15 minutes whether or not we can probably help them. So for that first consultation, if we can't help some folks, and there are certainly folks who call us and we're not the right ones for them, maybe we can steer them in the right direction. But call us at 832-341-4599, or look up our information on our website, texasdebtdefense.com, and feel free to give us a call. And our staff can get your information and advise you within that 15 minutes of whether or not you're qualified for the type of help that we offer most folks.
I also want to tell people that Attorney Cowan was also a CPA. Is that correct?
That's right. I was a licensed CPA for 30 years and am now classified as a retired CPA. I was board certified civil trial lawyer for 30 years. I let some of these certifications and licenses go during the pandemic. They just didn't seem like they were that important anymore, but I'm still practicing very actively. Tried 6 cases last year, won them all, and love getting in the courtroom. That's one thing we can do at Texas Debt Defense that most of these debt settlement companies and debt consolidation companies that advertise so much on late night TV cannot handle. And that's recognizing legal defenses, objections, and defects in the creditor's paperwork and proof that can win your case in court or help us negotiate a much more favorable settlement than they can. Another advantage we have is 30 plus years of experience in Texas courts, whereas these firms are usually national. They base their settlements and transactions on national averages, which don't take into account our unique Texas laws, and particularly our historic, very, very generous homestead protections and personal property exemptions, and a lot of collection remedies such as wage garnishment. You can't do that here. IRS can, but credit card companies and most creditors cannot. So why would you go to someone who can't take advantage of your local laws, Texas laws, cannot recognize objections or defects in the other side's paperwork? It's just amazing to me how often I get down to the courthouse and some debt buyer's lawyer will come in with a armload of 40 stacks of lawsuits he's filed, and we demand to see his proof if we haven't obtained it already. In some courts you can't. He can't find it. He doesn't have the assignment papers, and they just automatically dismiss it like that. No debt consolidation or debt settlement company can do that for you. But that's happened over and over again with me. It's happened in student debt, medical debt.
Do you see much improper debt collection?
Occasionally. It's not as prevalent as it used to be. But I just don't hear as many calls from that. But there are very significant protections under both federal and Texas state law that prohibit things such as calling you repeatedly, excessively in the middle of the night, calling you at work after you've notified them that they are not to call you at work, disclosing confidential information, threatening legal remedies that they cannot achieve in Texas, like we're going to garnish your wages, we're going to take your home, we're going to put you in jail. We see that is what we see the most. And we have letters that we send them, and usually we don't hear from them again because their status as a creditor can pretty quickly turn into a debtor if they violate these. There's some pretty significant remedies in there.
We just got another text. They want to know, can you give an example, not with the person's name, but can you give an example of a case that you've done?
Sure. This one is one of our favorite creditors, Discover Card. Tried this last summer. It was a Zoom trial. They had a very experienced representative, a woman of my vintage, who was a very smooth talker, but they had a fatal defect. And once they put on their case, that's what I told the judge, and she agreed. They failed to prove an essential element of their case, the contractual rate of interest that they were entitled to charge. That's not on the statements. It's in other contracts that they never put into evidence. Judge ruled for us, all this debt went away.
The debt
I'm
went
amazed
away.
that credit card companies can come into court, or their lawyers can do that, and they're not prepared. And it doesn't happen every time. Some of the lawyers are very good. We've been dealing with most of these law firms for years and years, and for most of them, we have very good working relationships, which is an extremely valuable asset for us. It's just much more efficient when you know and trust the lawyer on the other side. Certainly, both sides uphold their sworn obligation to zealously represent their client, but it just helps when you know this lawyer, you've dealt with them, you know they're a person of their word, and it just makes life easier, and it benefits clients for less legal fees, less delay, and better outcomes.
Well, these creditors have always had the upper hand on us, and now we have a chance to get kind of even, at least work on a level playing field with your practice.
Well, they do have some very powerful collection remedies. That's why you should have a legal consultation if you're facing any significant legal controversy or litigation. If you've been sued, you should consult and retain counsel as soon as possible. Some people say, how can I afford it? I can't afford to pay my bills.
Yes.
Our experience is that they cannot afford not to get a lawyer. A lawyer, we wouldn't have stayed in business for 37 years if we couldn't get the vast majority of our clients a good return on their investment in us, as far as either erasing the debt, eliminating the debt, or significantly reducing it, or negotiating terms that they can live with to pay over time. That's what we offer. That's how we help folks. We strive to give our clients terms that they can afford.
Okay.
So we look into that, and we talk about that, and we bend over backwards to get reasonable payments for them so that they can utilize and benefit from our services.
I am so excited about this show because there's so many people that don't realize they have options.
Yeah, exactly.
If you go to an attorney, they're going to say bankrupt. That's it. But that's not always an option, is it?
Well, one of the most gratifying things about this area of practice is people come to us, and sometimes they're often in tears. They're in so much pain. They've been losing sleep. It's been causing problems in all their relationships. They're stressed out. And we tell them, I want you to stop worrying. I want you to focus on taking care of yourself. Let us do the worrying. It's not as bad as you think. And give us some time. It takes some patience to work things through the court system sometime. The pandemic clogged up the legal system. It's taking the courts years to catch up. A case I tried in February went all the way back to 2019. So it takes a while. But eventually, all these cases end, and we get them behind our clients. And it's just very gratifying to see people turn their financial lives around and see them achieve the freedom that they're entitled to. Freedom from this burden of debt, freedom of being manipulated and abused by some creditors and creditors' lawyers who take advantage of their lack of knowledge, lack of expertise in the law. They're new to this. They've never had to deal with a creditor or a lawsuit, and you really need a trustworthy guide.
Well, I have known one of your associates for a long time, probably one of the finest men I've ever worked with, very smart, intelligent, and I'm so glad that he contacted us and get your firm with us, because we have hundreds and thousands of people watching us and listening to us now. And with the way the economy is, and we didn't cause this. This was all caused, I'm going to say it, by Washington. And, it's not, you're not a bad person because you've got debt.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people have debt, but it's going to be how you handle it. So what we're doing is we're just giving an alternative to bankruptcy that just happens to work, right?
Oh yeah. No, most of my people have had something unfortunate happen in their life, whether it's a embezzlement that ruined their small business, a layoff, a health problem, a divorce, some difficult challenge and trial in life that got them into this situation. And there's a right way to deal with it, and there are certainly some wrong ways to deal with it. Certain taxes, for instance, I didn't come here to talk about taxes today,
but we will down the road.
One of the most common mistakes that small businesses do that I want to warn you about, because I've seen it lead to so much misery, is small businesses who are having a cash flow crunch, who choose not to pay their payroll taxes to the federal government.
Yes.
Thinking, oh, well, the IRS is going to give me time, going to give me some months, and I'll turn things around and I'll make it up later. There'll be some penalties. The problem is a big chunk of those payroll taxes are called trust fund taxes, for which the IRS can come after the individual owners or other responsible persons involved in the finances of the company. There's no bankruptcy discharge. There's no corporate or LLC protection from that kind of claim, and it can follow people beyond the grave. So that is one of the biggest problems, and the lawsuits to deal with that are very expensive, and the law is favored very much in favor of the IRS in that. They take a particularly strong interest in payroll tax enforcement. So I just wanted to mention that because it's a huge problem for small business.
Yes, I'm glad you did mention that.
I just handed a note here. It says, that's about minimum payments. Is that what you wanted me to talk about?
Minimum payments. Yes.
Yeah, we get asked a lot. Should I continue making the minimum payments on my credit card debt? Should I stop? I can't afford to pay all my bills.
Right.
Well, like most legal questions, this one requires some factual investigation and analysis, and that's what we do. But often we find that if people cannot even afford to pay more than the minimum on their credit card debt, we often advise our clients to go ahead and stop paying the minimum credit card payment because for various reasons. The credit card companies aren't even going to talk to you or us. They're not going to offer you any relief until you've been in default for 90 days. Now, there's some situations where it would be a disastrously wrong choice to make. For instance, folks who are just in a temporary cash flow problem and can't pay all their credit card debts, but they have a reasonable chance of paying it off in a reasonable period of time. For them, the risk of the jump in default interest rates, the usurious interest rates, is not worth that risk. But for other folks their only choice is to negotiate away a lot of that claim, it's the right choice for them. But I wouldn't suggest that anyone make it without a careful analysis and evaluation. But it's something we often do.
There's a lot of debt consolidation companies out there.
Mr. Conner, they asked about the 4% versus the month and how long it takes to pay down the credit card debt.
Yeah, I've been reminded that most minimum credit card payments are 4% of the principal. That would take, if someone just made the minimum payments, that would take 20 to 30 years, right, to pay all that off. And so if you can't pay more than your minimum, that's probably not the best way to go. We can usually get those folks a much better outcome.
Wow, that's amazing. I want you to educate our viewers about these debt consolidation companies and these debt settlement groups, especially if they've been dealt with before.
They can help some folks, but there are some folks that they're definitely not an advantage for. Number one, they don't resolve the underlying problem. of, for most folks, of spending beyond their means, of not budgeting carefully, of not making the hard choices that we all have to make in life, that we all want and covet things that we sometimes can't afford. Almost all of us. So that's the main problem. It just kicks the can down the road. They're particularly bad for folks who have a poor credit rating because they're not going to be able to qualify for a lower interest rate. Another disadvantage to these debt consolidation, debt settlement companies, I think I already mentioned, they're national companies that don't utilize local debtor-friendly laws that we have here in Texas.
And they don't have an attorney like Mr. Cowan that's gonna go to court if you have to and put the pressure on him to get you a lower deal.
I don't know if my staff's comment came through, but the other big difference between a lawyer and a debt consolidation company is they are a faceless, unlicensed company. They don't have you don't know who you're going to be dealing with. It's just some stranger on the phone who doesn't have a law license to protect. You can't call the State Bar of Texas if they go and steal your money and run off to Aruba or something. They don't have a license to protect. They'll shut down and set up another one. And some of them have gone bankrupt or absconded. We saw one where they wanted the payments sent to, where was it in the Caribbean? Nevis, some little bitty tax haven there. And we certainly recommend against that.
Yeah, I would say so. We talked about the different types of bankruptcy, and I just wanted to bring that up so people understand. But what you do is you show them an alternative to bankruptcy.
Exactly. Some folks are under the misimpression that bankruptcy will erase all my debt. I'll get a fresh start. Sometimes for some folks it can, but usually not. There are a lot of debts that bankruptcy will not resolve, most tax debts. There are some debts that can be discharged in some bankruptcies, but there are a very complex set of deadlines, and you really have to prepare for it. You can't just walk in and say, I got this big tax debt, let's bankrupt it out, because you will have missed the deadline. You won't qualify for a discharge. Now, here's what I can do for a lot of folks without their filing bankruptcy. There's a remedy in the Internal Revenue Code called an offer in compromise based on doubt as to collectability. The Internal Revenue Manual says they must take into account the probable effect of a bankruptcy. And what's worked for me is to go ahead and fill out the bankruptcy forms to show an IRS agent or an appeals officer or collection agent that my client is ready to file bankruptcy. Here's the Internal Revenue Manual section saying you have to take that into account. I want a bankruptcy analysis and consideration from the IRS as to the likely effect of a bankruptcy, and take that into account in negotiating a much more favorable offer in compromise settlement. Now, offers in compromise, those are based on a tax term called reasonable collection potential, but it's really very similar to what other creditors have. Someone who's solvent, has a lot of property and a big job, he's not going to have as much leverage or negotiating position as someone who left the workforce several years ago and has been living off his retirement account and not paying the taxes on it. That can really be one of the most advantageous types of case for an offer in compromise. But we do those a lot.
So, Finis, if they sit down with you and you go over what the problems are, but it looks like their only alternative is bankruptcy, do you handle that for them? Oh,
we've got lawyers. We definitely, that's all they do is bankruptcy and practice in bankruptcy court. They like to brag that the difference between a trial lawyer and a bankruptcy lawyer is bankruptcy lawyers actually go to court, where a lot of litigators don't. It's just motion practice or pushing paper.
Let me just for a minute skip over to taxes since you brought it up. We do a lot of shows on tax relief, tax resolution in our other cities. And it seems like the biggest thing that I want to educate people about is open those letters.
Oh my
Don't
goodness.
throw them in the drawer. Am I right?
Absolutely. People are, I understand. I understand. It's just a psychological defense mechanism. I used to experience it myself when I was younger. When I'd get IRS mail at home, oh, what's inside here?
Yeah, right.
It can't be good. It's not the check. And I frequently do get a stack of IRS mail that's never been opened, going back how far back. That's not the best procedure to use it. And here's why. There are legal remedies that have strict deadlines. There are opportunities to appeal an audit or a determination that you only have 30 days. If you don't appeal on time, the alternative is very unpleasant. The alternative is paying the tax deficiency in full and suing in federal district court or the U.S. Court of Federal Claims for a refund. Most folks don't have the cash to take advantage of that. So they want to go to tax court where you don't have to pay the tax first, but you still get a legal ruling. There's some tax cases. I want a jury. I've had some that I really bent over backwards to get a jury in district court. There's some I would not want my clients in front of a jury, and the IRS fights to get those back into a district court where there's a jury. We lawyers see so many people and so many problems. We kind of take for granted what our own opinions of them are. But I was visiting my wife's uncle up in Minneapolis, and we're out admiring his garden in the back. He was so proud of it. And he asked what I did, and I told him, and he said, it was kind of like Jonathan Winters, and It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. I pay my taxes. I think you should pay your taxes. I think everybody should pay your taxes. Well, I agree with that. But life happens, and things happen that sometimes people cannot afford to satisfy their taxes, or it would make it so financially burdensome that it wouldn't make sense for them to keep their business open or to get up and go to work.
Well, I also
the uncertainties of life, and often the IRS and the DOJ, as human as they are wrong. That's why we have the courts.
Well, I know it's also very important. Not only do they open that mail, but if you hire a firm like Debt Defense, you don't have to talk to the IRS anymore.
That's what we insist on. I do not want my clients talking to the creditors, including.
Tell them why, Finis.
Now, let me mention one other things about the mail, IRS mail. When the IRS is sending these notices, giving deadlines to appeal, deadlines to file in tax court, 90-day letters, they often send those by regular U.S. first-class mail, because that's all the law requires. Some people think they're safer if the IRS don't know where they are. They're not. The law books, the court cases are full of tragic cases where people had sound, legitimate legal defenses to tax claims that they waived by not keeping their current address on file with the IRS. So I tell people about those tragic cases over and over and over again. And I beg them that when your address changes, or if you haven't already, notify the IRS. Don't rely on the Postal Service. There's a form the IRS requires. You can do it online, but let them know your current address where you will get notices. And if you don't want to open them, we have people who will do that for you. But get them to us in time, please, when we can help. I see people who procrastinate, and I understand that.
Yes.
Most of us do that. But several times I've seen people with six-figure refund potential claims that they've waited too long to collect on. And it just breaks my heart. And I hate to see people cry, so I don't even mention it.
And you know what? Also, people who have gotten behind on paying their taxes, I don't think they realize that if you haven't kept good books, they're going to go with the gross amount, even though you've got a lot of write-offs.
Oh, you're absolutely right. If you don't file your tax returns, the IRS will come in and file what's called a substitute return. That's just like you said, just the gross income without deductions for payroll
Right.
expense or your home mortgage interest or all these things that the law entitles you to deduct. And it's a much higher tax figure. But if you come to a lawyer with that, he can amend your return or file your proper return based on records and facts and get you the proper amount of tax. But what I see a lot of folks do, and it's tragic, but they can't pay their taxes. Small businesses usually, self-employed people usually, that don't have their taxes withheld. And they're under the mistaken belief that if I can't pay my taxes, there's no use in filing the returns. Oh, mamma mia. Do you know what the IRS penalty is for filing your tax return late if you owe taxes? 5% a month for the first 5 months, goes down after that. But that is a big, fat, stupid penalty, or rather ignorant penalty to achieve. And those are set. Sometimes we can negotiate those down. We spend a lot of time and effort doing that. The other thing I beg people to do is not rely on first class, untrackable mail to send anything time sensitive to the IRS, to any governmental agency or your creditors. Use certified mail that you can look up and save the tracking date showing the received delivered date, or FedEx or some other service like that. Those are valuable little pieces of paper. Just this past year, I had a client come to me. They filed their tax return on January 15, as they were required to do. They filed it, thank God, certified mail. 6 months later, the IRS writes them and they've assessed an $8,000 late filing penalty, saying that the return had not been filed until April 29th. That's what their records show. They attached it in there. Can you believe the IRS would lie to you like that or state something? Right. They do. So fortunately, if this client had just had, I just sent it with a first class forever stamp, I don't have any proof of doing it other than my word. But if you've got proof that it was delivered or was mailed on April 15 and delivered soon thereafter, they back off. They trust the Postal Service or FedEx a lot more than the IRS trusts its own records, apparently. But that is a valuable receipt. Everything in tax law and often in other types of debt law depends on paperwork. They're not going to take your word for anything. They're not required to. The taxpayers and the debtors often have the burden of proof on a lot of issues.
I want to get back to debt relief, but before we go, with the IRS, tell people why that they should hire a company like yours to represent them and have them not talk to the IRS. Tell people what could happen with them talking to the IRS.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I represented, I think it was a trucking company. And this man who owned it was he was a trucking company owner, very sophisticated and educated. But he was used to talking, and he talked a lot and making his own cases, and he insisted on participating and talking to the IRS and just going on and on and on. And he waived. He just completely blew us out of the water on several issues because he didn't understand them. We're not required when we're negotiating with the IRS. We have to be honest with them. But it's not a courtroom where we're required to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. This is a negotiation, and you'd be there all day if you told the whole truth. So I would never suggest anybody that they mislead the IRS. But a client blathering on is going to create problems more often than not. And all tax lawyers have experienced that heartbreak when their client sticks their big foot in their big mouth. And it's just
because they don't know how to answer the questions you do.
It's a bad day.
Yes.
When that happens. And so take advantage of your lawyer's knowledge of the traps, the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of your case. And that's our job, is to advocate, not to lie or mislead anybody, but to package and market and argue our client's case in the best light and according to the facts and the records and the law, which sometimes is subjective and can be debated reasonably by people on both sides of good faith. That's what courts are for.
Now, what court do you go into? Do you go into federal or state?
Federal,
Okay.
U.S. District Court, U.S. Court of Federal Claims is the other refund court, the U.S. Tax Court in Washington, D.C., which a lot of folks represent themselves in. It's sort of the small claims court of the tax jurisprudence, but it's often a good idea to hire a lawyer to represent you there because you are up against lawyers, and that's all they do is enforce the tax laws against you. And you're at an extreme disadvantage without a tax lawyer on your side. Other courts, the state courts, a lot of our non-tax civil cases or property tax cases end up in our our state district courts at the county courthouse in various counties. I've tried cases all the way from Tyler to El Paso, Dallas to the Valley, and where were we a few weeks ago? Erath County, where everybody's hair is, they're very nice, but their hair is punched down from their cowboy hat and they got a white line at the top. But the friendliest folks you ever want to meet. They invite us to come back and go smallmouth bass fishing, and we're going to do it.
You know, I got to tell you, so we have
America lawyer wants to go back though.
But also the other courts that we frequent are the Texas Justice of the Peace courts. Not too long ago, raised their maximum dollar jurisdictional limit from $5,000 to $10,000 and then to $20,000. So a lot of credit card debts started being filed in JP courts, which is unfortunate because a lot of the JPs are not lawyers, and they are a law unto themselves, very unpredictable. Some of them are quite tyrannical. Oh my gosh. Last year, remember that case where Mr. Cowan, did you tell your client he could remove his mask? This was on the Zoom trial.
Oh gosh.
My kids didn't know it could be transmitted over the internet. So good thing I couldn't hit the mute button because I said some things to that judge that I'm glad didn't get published, didn't get over.
Well, we've only got about 2 minutes. Tell people why they should retain your firm.
Well, I trust that you will find your dealings with us will be enjoyable and bring you peace of mind. We don't need every client's case that calls up. So we're not going to hustle you. We're not going to hard sell you. We're going to tell you the hard facts, the truth, but we're going to tell you all your options. The clients come first. We as lawyers have to put our client's interest above our own. And if I can do it cheaper for somebody, by golly, I'm going to do it that way because life's too short not to, and they're going to send me better cases down the road. We got a lot of repeat business and a lot of referrals from satisfied clients.
Well, I got to tell you, Vince, that we have tax experts around the country. You're our Houston expert, but I got to tell you, the way you explain things, it is such a joy to hear how you explain things and you make it where a layman, even like myself, can understand. And I wish more of my tax experts were like you. Give everybody your phone number.
832-341-4599. We pride ourselves on being available. And if I could say one last thing.
Sure.
I would try to impress on people that we understand and we treat people like we understand. We show that to people. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity in our system, and we do that. And we realize that bad things happen to good people, and we enjoy helping.
Amen to that. Well, guess what? The good news is you're going to be back with us next week on our show.
Very
and
good. I look forward to that, Steve-O.
My phones have been ringing with text, and we'll start taking phone calls next week. Thank you so much.
I look forward to that.
We'll see you again next
Thank
week.
you, Steve-O. Have a good one.
Thank you. So this is the Ask the Expert Show. We will be back again next week with more experts. And if you missed today's show, you don't want to miss next week. We have got some of the most incredible experts. And please write us. You can text us at 954-336-3767 if you've got a expert area that you would like to be heard. Everybody have a wonderful and blessed weekend. We'll see you next Friday with more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert Show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.